It's Kosmo. I just got my fruit trees in. I'm getting ready to put those in my food plots. I bought those from Hallman Farms. They're in Little Mountain, South Carolina. They're a wildlife nursery, and they invented these trees. They cultivated these trees, and they're the only nursery where you can get these. They're nice pear trees, and I'll show you some pictures of trees loaded with pears and the deer picking the pears off the limbs, and it's a really great perennial food plot for you. And we're going to show you how to plant these. And the first thing I do is get these rubber covered gloves. Keeps the dirt out from under your fingernails and keep from cutting your hands up. And I sharpen my shovel just razor sharp. It's much easier to dig, and I don't need to tell you have to be careful throwing it in the back of the truck because you can cut other things up. I marked these each location with a flag, and I did that with a rangefinder to my stand. So when you come with your bow, you don't need a rangefinder. Every tree is 20, 30, 40. You've got it all figured out. So it really actually is pretty cool. It's food and range finding for you. So we're going to get started and dig this hole. When you dig this dirt out of here, since these are bare root trees, you don't want to tear up the roots. So you take your shovel, and being sharper, it makes it much easier, and you chop all this dirt up so that it doesn't tear those little feeder roots off when you're putting it in the hole, putting the dirt back over the roots. Now I always leave a space here so I'm not compacting the dirt back down because it's going to go in the hole. That only took a few minutes to dig that hole, and the old saying is dig $1 million hole for a $5 tree, which means give it some good fluffy dirt for the roots to grow into. So let's go over to the trailer and grab a tree, and I'll show you how they package those. These trees come in a nice box, and they put them in plastic and pack them. Throw some material in there to keep the roots moist. I put that box lid back on there so it keeps the trees from getting hot and in the sun so they don't dry out. This is a grafted tree. So the root system is one kind of tree, and the top is the pear tree that we want. This is the graft. You do not want that below the surface of the dirt. And my hole is not quite big enough, so I'm going to have to enlarge this just a little bit and deepen it some. And if you get your hole a little too deep, that's okay, because the tree's light and you can just lift it up. But this graft is above the surface now, and it's better to have a tree planted a little bit too high than too low. So this is why you don't want big clumps and clods, because you just rake this in, let that little fluffy dirt go around the roots. And the gloves kind of help you break up those clods as well. And air will kill these roots. And I always have my water tank with me, and I can have the hose laying right here because the tree needs to be supported. And I just water this in and just basically make chocolate pudding out of it, because air will kill the roots. This water gets rid of all the air spaces in the dirt, and so I just soak this in. Plus we've been pretty dry here in Kansas, so the dirt is actually fairly dry, so you just go ahead and fill it up like a bucket of water. And I water that second part in as well. And if you don't have a water tank, you can just use water jugs, buckets of water, whatever you need to do. I've just got this tank for spraying and watering burning pasture, so it just makes it handy to bring it with me, and you can just use a garden hose like you're in the yard. There you have it, a tree planted in just a few minutes that'll give you pears for years to come, and probably pears in 2 years, but almost 3. All the rest of the trees that I've planted in 3 years, I've gotten good pear crops out of them. Obviously hail and late frost can hurt you, as with any fruit tree, but these things are really a good deer attractant. I'm going to show you how I stake it and protect it from the deer, so I'll get that equipment and I'll be back with you in just a minute. I'm planting 14 trees today, so I won't have time to get them planted and permanently stake each one. So temporarily, since it's windy and this is not a good base, it's brand new roots and water in the wet dirt, so a hard wind could blow it over. So I just pound that stake in at an angle and use this tree tape, but I'm going to show you how we do it for permanent. I like these. This is just remesh for concrete, for putting in sidewalks and so forth, and I really like those for making a giant tomato cage, I guess, is lack of any other explanation for it. Tie these up to make it easier for you. Took a shovel hook to kind of help hang on to the top of this thing. It's easier to make these on the ground rather than in a tree, around the tree. So I go ahead and take my tape off of there, springs back out. And I really like these. I cut the bottom so they have spikes, and you can reach through here and prune your trees, and these are big enough that if you never ever want to take them off for the life of the tree, you don't have to. I use the T-post to secure this as well as the tree. So I go ahead and mark where I want that T-post and move this over. By moving that cage out of the way, it doesn't bother me pounding this post in. So then I set the cage back where I want it. And I do the same thing over here. I just kind of push this down a little bit in the bottom. So now my tree is protected, and I'll show you how we wire that up. You want to protect the tree from the wire, so I just use this clear tubing. You can use garden hose, anything you want. And then I also use my trapper spool, just so convenient. And I always waste a little wire, because if you make it too short, well, then it's just too short. So thread this on here. And then I just find a little limb and go around the tree like so. Now this tree was crooked, so now's my opportunity to straighten it up. And it's very important that you have your tubing going down, because otherwise rain will get in there and that wire will rust, and it'll almost guarantee break before you're through the first season. I just wrap it around that post. You're not trying to make it too awfully tight. All you're trying to do is keep the tree from rubbing around inside the cage. Once again, keep that tubing down low so the rain doesn't run right into it. And you're not trying to strangle the tree, you're just trying to keep it upright. I'll bet start to finish on this, we didn't take 20 minutes to do it. So it's very, very simple. I do prune some of these limbs, like these two bottom ones. I will prune them back because I actually don't want limbs growing that low. I want that tree to go up and canopy out. So Hallman Farms, Little Mountain, South Carolina. I'll put the information up for their website and their phone number. Call them, get a catalog, shop it. They've got many different varieties of these pears. They've got apples, they've got oaks, they've got just about everything that you'd want for your wildlife planting. So just get them shipped to you and put them in the ground. Kosmo with Kosmo's Blackdog Outdoors. See ya. These are my favorite trail cam pictures. I planted this tree 3 years prior to this. It's loaded with pears and the deer are going after it just how I wanted them to. You'll notice that I have this tree staked differently, and I used to use barbed wire, and it was hard on clothes and hard on your hands, and it made it more difficult to get in there and pull grass and weeds and so forth. So the remesh cage to protect it is much better, much easier, much more user friendly. The feeder's about empty, and the deer still come into the plot and they've got pears. These here are pictures depicting how I've deployed these in my food plots, and as I said before, they're all ranged, so they're range markers as well as food. And it's just very handy to have all these laid out in your food plot like this, and it makes it for great hunting. And as the trees grow up, it won't be such an open plot, and the deer will feel more comfortable coming into the plot. Hey, it's Kosmo. I'm going to prune my pear trees now. It's the middle of August. We planted them back at the 1st of April. And I usually wait till toward the end of the first growing season before I nip off any limbs, because once you cut them, they're cut. So I usually prune pretty slowly to get the tree over time to where I want it to be. But there are some limbs that we call suckers that absolutely have to come off, or your tree will become a bush. And you can see that when we planted them, I used the remesh, and how easily that you can reach through here and prune the trunk and pull any weeds and grass to keep it nice and clean. I put weed barrier mulch down here so my tree doesn't have any grass or weed competition, and it'll grow better and it just looks nicer anyway. But I just have these little nippers, just cheap ones, you can get them anywhere, and rather than just bust that off with my hand, I nip it off like so it's a nice clean cut and I don't rip the bark. So by taking those suckers off, you can keep your tree nice and clean. The trunk is nice and clean and it's straight, otherwise it'll turn itself into a bush. Now the upper limbs I do, and once again I waited. We had a pretty big windstorm, and so you can see this one's broken and it's putting a shoot up this way, and it looks like a pretty good shoot, but that's going to grow up and give competition and rub on the other limbs. So I just go ahead and take it off as well. And then as we move up the tree, anything that grows into the interior, I want to take it off. So I snip these off, and this is easy to do when it's a small tree, but it gets more difficult as it gets bigger. But if you get after it when it's younger, the basic shape will be what you're after, and it keeps the tree nice and healthy. So any of the limbs that are going on the inside, I try to get those off so that it doesn't rub. Got a couple here that I really don't want growing. This one's going to start to lean down too far, because ultimately what I want is this tree to grow up and out and canopy. And so I try to trim all these low ones off so the tree gets up and it gets some height to it, and the deer won't go after the pears and tear the limbs off and rip up your tree trying to get to the pears that are low hanging. That's pretty good there. You can kind of see through it. There might be a couple extra here that I want to take off, but this is very easy to do. This took me just a couple of minutes. You can employ this same method for the ornamental trees in your yard, and it just makes the tree look nice and clean. And people always ask me when the best time to plant a tree is, and I always tell them it was 25 years ago, and the second best time is yesterday. But in reality, I plant these about the first week of April. And to do that, I order my trees in December or January, so I make sure that I get the stock. So call Hallman Farms. They're in Little Mountain, South Carolina. They're a wildlife nursery. They're a great source of information and a great source for all your plant stock. And so I order in December, January for an April shipment. Get started, plant some trees in your food plot.